Good afternoon and welcome to Sioux Falls Downtown Rotary regular Monday meeting. We're very proud to host two amazing guests today, my friend and fellow Rotarian Vaney Hariri of Think 3D and Lieutenant John Thum with the Sioux Falls Police Department. We're going to have a powerful conversation today and we have the right people at the table to do so. A couple of reminders. We are looking to have a productive conversation and comments to that end are welcome. They are productive and they move conversations forward. Additionally, questions will be entertained from downtown Rotarians only. You can post them in the feed, and if we have time, we will take them at the end. Rotarian Jason Herbold will moderate today. Over the last several weeks, we've begun these Rotary meetings with the Rotary four-way test that speaks directly to our conversation today. However, today we will begin with a statement that Rotary International released last week. At Rotary, we have no tolerance for racism. Promoting respect, celebrating diversity, demanding ethical leadership, and working tirelessly to advance peace are central tenets of our work. We have more work to do to create more just, open, and welcoming communities for all. We know there are no easy fixes, and that challenging conversations and work lie before all of us. Rotary's strength has long been our ability and commitment to bring people together. We will tap into that strength now, and as we stand with those who are working for peace and justice. Rotary will do our part to listen, learn, and take action to ensure that we continue to contribute to making positive change. Hence our conversation today.
I want to thank our guests for being here today, Vaney Hariri and Lieutenant John Thum. I also want to thank Sioux Falls Downtown Rotary President Jessie Schmidt for her leadership and for elevating this important conversation. To our viewers today, we are fortunate to have these two fine individuals with us. Vaney Hariri and Lieutenant John Thum come with a history of seeking understanding, and we are grateful to them for that. All of us here have our own points of view on the topics we will discuss today. Some of those points of view are quite strong. Those points of view have been developed through our own unique set of experiences. That is normal. Today, I ask all of us to take this hour for learning with the goal of understanding. Because without understanding, we cannot move forward together positively. We have so much to talk about today, but before we get into these very difficult topics, would each of you take a moment to tell our viewers a little bit about your background and why it is that you are uniquely positioned to talk about this important topic of building understanding in our community? We'll start with Vaney.
So for me, my history, I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, moved to Sioux Falls a little bit before high school, went to high school here. Participated in helping develop, some of our after-school programs, Edison specifically. And then later in my early teen years, I was a member of the Human Relations Commission in the city of Sioux Falls for about 10 years, chair of that for 5. Did the work in the community alongside that in terms of various boards, nonprofits, all of those type of things. And now I'm the co-founder of a company, Think 3D, that specializes in leadership development training and organizational culture consulting. And we also provide a leadership development training program for the community.
Thank you, Vaney. Lieutenant Thum.
I was born and raised in Sioux Falls. Grew up in, it's called Pettigrew Heights now, but and grew up local Sioux Falls kid. And in fact, Vaney and I were actually classmates at Lincoln High School, class of '98, right?
Yep,
Vaney,
yep.
right? And so went to school in University of Sioux Falls in town because, of course, I wanted to play football, and that was a fine institution to go. And basically, it was a longer story, but my path led me to law enforcement after a career in sales and doing some other things. And what I found when I got into law enforcement is that this area in particular became kind of a passion for me as I served the community. Like I said, the paper route I had as a kid was one of the first neighborhoods I patrolled as a police officer.
Oh,
and
wow.
the connection that I felt towards my community and the connection towards service that I felt moving forward and naturally became this extension of our service, right? Was to understand and work with the community. And with that, I kind of started carving out some some niches that were somewhat unintentional, but sometimes they just happen, and eventually led with me working with Lutheran Social Services on their advisory board for all the New American Center, working with outreach that we started kind of in 2015, 2016 with some forums, post-Ferguson, laying a lot of the groundworks for what would later become our Community Resource Officer program. And I have a problem. I can't let stuff go sometimes. Like, so when I get involved in something, I stay involved in something. So as things have progressed, my career has gone different directions. I'm currently Support Services Lieutenant and Commander of the SWAT team, but this conversation never stops being part of what my goals are as a police department and what our goals as an agency. And I think it's something we'll talk about throughout this, that it's always part of your conversation. It's always part of all of our conversations. And if we are not all having a conversation about this, then really we're not moving in the right direction.
That's right. That's right. I just heard last week that the two of you guys went to high school together, which just makes this all the more interesting.
I cannot remember if it was him or his twin brother, but one of them hit me so hard. It was a legal hit, but like one of the
Football.
I probably should have led with that, but I mean, it was yeah, that one is in my brain.
In your head.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna claim that because I was a harder hitter than my brother.
I think it was you. I'm pretty sure it was you.
He's
Claim
the
that
doctor.
one.
I gotta have
Yeah,
something in there.
yeah. I'm pretty
That
sure
is
it was
just
you.
terrific.
Yeah.
We're going to continue with the question about what happened on the day of the protests. And Bonnie, you were starting to kind of transition as to kind of how things were kind of playing out in terms of the early stages of the protest.
Absolutely. So the process was already established by some young folks that wanted to participate, that wanted to be a part of the conversation. They were expecting somewhere around 25 people, something along those lines. And essentially what happened was some of our resource officers, because I'm a community ambassador and I engage with the police department to help them reach into certain communities that are otherwise difficult to get in contact with. And they reached out and said, hey, we don't have certain permits, that type of thing for these events. We want to make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted to make sure everything goes off smooth. And so then I contacted Julian Beaumont, who's a highway patrol officer, and he participated in engaging with the young folks. And at that point in time, we got with the PD to plan the route, all of those type of things and what was happening. And when it came together as smooth as you would expect something like that to happen. We had the route plan. Lieutenant Thum essentially led the walk, all of that, in terms of making sure that the streets were clear. Everyone got there safely. We had some great speeches, some wonderful energy. And it was something that I didn't think that I would necessarily see in Sioux Falls, and it was a beautiful sight. Once it concluded, we kind of, had that conversation like, hey, this part is done. You know what I mean? But some of it moved on, and he could probably pick up in terms of what happened in that.
Yeah, so after the event, I think a lot of us who have invested in this conversation, I think put a lot of stock into what the outcome was going to be. Like, I think I know between us, we really wanted something to be positive, to be peaceful, and to be a really great event. Bonnie and I found each other afterwards and kind of shared a little moment, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us were like, okay, the conversations that we've had up until this point, the work we've put in, has led to this very positive event. And I hung around a little bit because I knew George Floyd's uncle was still there giving an interview, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to give him a ride back to his car because there's people everywhere. And as I was kind of watching, a pretty good-sized group still maintained where they were at. And again, I was kind of duly focused on having some other conversations and talking to other people. And that group then began a march down the street. And our traffic officers, event officers, park officers were there and hoping to just kind of facilitate some more peaceful activity. I was able to give them a ride back to the car, and then things started to move a little bit. And I'm not going to go into huge details about what took place. But the route obviously wound through Sioux Falls, and I can tell you, as that went on, there was a distinct change in some of the tone that took place from that point forward. some of the positivity was replaced. There was still a lot of positive people out along that march. However, comments picked up with frequency as far as what was directed towards officers who were facilitating this. And the tone definitely started to change a little bit from one of positivity to one of negativity. And more vehicles started entering in and joining into that. And again, it culminated with what took place at the mall. And there was a lot of unknowns. When we plan a march, we know where it's going to end up, where things are going to happen. When we don't, we just don't know. We didn't know what the outcome was going to be that day. And then it culminated there. And I don't want to dwell too much about what took place at the mall, because that's been pretty well covered and pretty publicized. But what I do want to talk about is when the first rock flew, that group of people, right, who were going against what some of the other group wanted, stood in front of us, linked arms, and called for peace. Wow. And there's a few distinct faces I'll always remember from that first engagement, because I looked to them and I was seeking help, because we're going towards a collision path here that none of us wanted to be on, and was hoping for some way to stem that tide, right? And I still remember a couple faces out of there doing their best to try to keep it from happening, and just when it would lull, another giant rock would come through, right? And it was dangerous for both them, dangerous for us, and it was very clear where we were headed from that point forward, and that's been covered. And we don't need to go too far into that, but that's small group that stood and held their line. Like, that was the Sioux Falls that I know, right? Yeah. And like I said, what transpired from there is something that's been covered, and I don't think we need to, doesn't further our conversation unless you had something.
Well, what I would say to that is to your point, like, we can't control the first rock.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody can come from wherever they want and do that. We can't control the first rock. The part that concerns me, the part that I want us to think about as a community, is the second rock, right? And that was somebody from our community. Those are our kids. And I know that when things like that happen, the temptation is to, fixate on the law and order of it. And not that we shouldn't, but we got to figure out what's happening with our young people. This should inspire us to have conversations and to say, what was running through your mind to make you feel that way, or to use those particular options. It should wake us all up to be able to say that we're not absolved from what's happening in the world. We're not outside of it. We're not that sleepy town off someplace else anymore. And as much as we need to be thoughtful about how we handle those situations, and I believe PD handled it very well, we also have to be thoughtful about how do we come out of this, making sure we're wrapping our arms around our young people so we know what's happening. We know what's in their minds. We know what's in their hearts. And more importantly, they know what's in ours. And so that we can prevent these type of situations from ever happening.
To piggyback on what you're saying, Bonnie, is that a lot of people look at, well, what are PD and what are our groups seeking to advocate doing to do that? And I think Bonnie's correct. It's not just our conversation. It's everybody's conversation. Because I can tell you firsthand, looking out at the crowd, that it was a multi-socioeconomic, ethnic, diverse makeup of the crowd out there, right? Right. It was from every aspect of Sioux Falls was there. And I think we can try to isolate this conversation between groups who we have appointed as the ones who should figure this out. But that is not the case. Because, to be honest, it's everybody's conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think we'll obviously probably talk more about this in this conversation, but if you're looking for us to solve this issue alone, we're not interested. We want your help, right?
Yeah.
We want all of us to get together on this topic.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, the second rock, right? Bonnie, that's a great point.
That's the thing.
That's the thing. And the third,
Right. But you just want to have a situation where once something like that happens, everybody says, "Hey, man, what are you doing?"
Yep.
Right. That didn't happen.
I believe if that had happened down at the courthouse or at the law enforcement center,
Would have been
that's what would have happened.
For sure.
Right. That's what would have happened.
For sure.
However, things get out of control, right? And that's where there's no one who could control that moment.
Well,
other than the individuals taking accountability for their actions, is what I want to say.
And there's no activist class. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get certified as an activist, right? And that's why we have to have those conversations before the thing. I mean, listen, the second best time is now.
Yeah.
Right? But the best time is before these type of things happen.
Yeah. Moving forward to really kind of defining kind of where we are as a city and then looking forward. Vaney, I'm interested, many of our viewers, just like so many in our country, they're not black.
Yeah.
They are not part of any minority group. Because of that, our experiences have been measurably different. Just have been. It's undeniable. Help us understand why there is so much anger and frustration. We think we understand, but quite frankly, we don't. At least not enough. I want to understand better. Our viewers want to understand better. Help us understand.
Sure. Well, the big thing is it's if you ever find yourself being surprised at the frustration or the anger that you see out there from people of color, that is probably the most clear and present example of the privilege, right? That's the clearest example that we have been disengaged, because there's a lot of people who have been in pain and hurting and in trauma and angry for a mighty long time for a lot of really good reasons, right? So historically, people can acknowledge all of these eras, right? That people will acknowledge slavery, they will acknowledge Jim Crow, they will acknowledge, as we go into the 60s, 70s, 80s, crack epidemic, all of these type of things, poverty, redlining. We can acknowledge all of these things historically, but no one wants to acknowledge what those things do to a people historically, right? They don't acknowledge of the generations being connected together through trauma. I didn't inherit my parents' business or wealth or whatever. I inherited their trauma. I inherited their frustration. And so when you have a situation, and for me, I like to simplify it all the way down to its root, because a lot of people here, particularly in our community, value liberty, right? They value the right to do whatever it is. And so when you think about a man, right, a man under God that has dominion over himself, right? And the idea that a person could come up to me and talk to me however they want, tell me to do whatever they want, is problematic, because that authority is bestowed. It is a social agreement, right? We're saying, listen, there's 18,000 law enforcement agencies, 180,000 law enforcement officials, policing 330 million people. That's not an easy prospect, however you slice it. The numbers are not there. And so to make that work, we endow these folks with a certain power. And so when it is abused, right, the oath takers, the people who take oaths because the pay will never make it enough, the thank yous will never be enough for the type of job that they have to do. So we ask them to take an oath because it'll never be fair. It'll never make sense that way. And so when you see a situation where a person in their neighborhood is essentially being murdered in front of someone's face, and people have to observe it, they have to watch the crime happen because of who's committing the crime. Right? If it was Joe Blow down the street, we would have been able to do something about it. But they had to watch it. And that has happened time and time and time again. And it is so frustrating and so painful to have to not even endure it, but the most painful thing is having to explain it, especially now that people can see it. And so whenever anybody thinks that the moment of frustration is now, they're missing the point. Right? This is just another example of how we weren't able to move past it, how we weren't able to move forward. And that's where a lot of that frustration and anger comes from, which means we have to have a different type of conversation now. We can't have a do you get it conversation. We have to have a what do we do conversation to get this fixed ASAP.
Lieutenant Thum, as we kind of work together for understanding, you have developed an outstanding reputation in this community. What approach have you taken to your profession that can be a model for others and other police forces?
Yeah, so my path to law enforcement maybe wasn't as conventional. I worked at Hy-Vee, I cut meat at Hy-Vee, I had a sales job, but in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be in law enforcement. And what drove me towards law enforcement was a sense of service. Like, I worked my sales job for a couple of years, and there's stability to Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Like, yeah, I mean, there's absolute stability. And I'll tell you firsthand, I do not and have not had that stability for about 15 years, right?
Yeah.
That's not part of my life. But I knew that's what was calling it to me, is that sense of service. And so I'll be honest, I was a bit naive as to what I was signing up for. I had one idea of what law enforcement was in sleepy Sioux Falls. And I grew up in Pettigrew Heights, which I thought was the rougher part of town. Right? As everybody told me, right? That's my paper route, like I said. And well, then I showed up and I'm like, oh wow, like this is not what I thought. Like there's a lot of pain. Like there's a lot happening that I had no idea that existed, even within my own neighborhood, as far as broken families, addiction, all the other countless lists that really drives these problems that police deal with. And you have to learn, right? You have to see what's out there. And I realized by watching effective police officers that they were the ones that were calm. They were the ones that were just normal people when they interacted with people. Like, a lot of the conversations that happen here are what people desire, and they don't want to be talked down to, and they don't want to be dealt with at that level. They want to have human being conversations with who they're dealing with. And again, this is something effective police officers have been doing for a long, long time. Like they've been able to do that, and so everybody looks at that like, how do I make that my own? Because we're all different individuals too. You can't create a robot cop, right? That is going to act this way, because they all carry emotions and they all carry skills that they have. And I think we try to affirm that now as just be here with people, right? And don't be. But there are times, obviously, we deal in chaos and we deal in conflict. And that's where we're called to step in and take control of situations. But when that's done, how do you restore dignity, and how do you have conversations with those that will have them with you? Because sometimes, due to substance abuse or other issues, there's just no rational conversation that's going to have. So, again, I think as we look for law enforcement, people desire to be treated like anybody would. They just want to have a normal conversation.
And I'll even say that's part of the nuance of, I think, community policing, right? It is the difference between the presumption of authority over a person versus authority as a technique, right? That just like all of the utility components that they have on that belt or they have at their disposal, authority is one of them, right? But that's a tool, and I think sometimes what gets confused is that is just a thing you have, you know what I mean? That you versus saying, hey, I'm going to do this. That doesn't work. We have to do this, and working through a process. Because part of what happens is in the policing situation, and again, it is a far broader conversation than just the police. Let's be super clear about that. But what happens is that we tend to dehumanize people, and we can dehumanize people in two ways. We can make them less than a person, where they're just a thug or just a criminal. Once you make them that, then it doesn't matter that they have kids or that they have parents or that they have people that love them, or you might be disrupting a family. It doesn't matter that they had a future. It doesn't matter what trauma led to their behavior. The other way that we can dehumanize people is by making them superhuman, where they're infallible, and now they don't get to make mistakes. They don't have mental health issues. They don't have PTSD. They don't have family dynamics that they have to manage. Right? They don't get bad days. Right? And then what we do is we take both of those parties and we do a disservice to both of them. And then we make it impossible to get to a point where we can just be with each other.
Yeah.
Right? And that is part of what we have to do, is break that cycle.
And I think a lot of what we'll talk about what we're doing moving forward, we still talk about what we've done in the past. And we've tried to adapt and establish community ambassador programs. So we're having conversations already, right? And we've had conversations within the community with our community resource officers, with street cops on a regular basis. I think sometimes people think they see a video of a cop playing basketball with some kids, right? Like that's just something new that's happening. Right. That's been happening all the time, right? A lot of people, and now it's become to the point where we're so busy that can we still carve out time to do those sort of things? But you're right. like the consequences of mistake are so high. So high for us, and we recognize that, and we understand that a mistake we make has far-reaching implications for our community. But we also recognize that we're the extension of government that people deal with on a daily basis. Like we are and there's a lot of disenchantment about a lot of different things, a lot of different topics. I may be really mad about what happened at the courthouse, how this guy got sentenced for this, and this guy got sentenced with this, and we can't help but see the racial disparity within that. But who's my closest extension for that frustration? It's the police, right? And I think sometimes people recognize the police only control one small portion of this conversation. That there's so many different levels that are there. And I think, again, you'd like to say, like, I'm no superhero. Right? I'm a flawed human being just like the rest of us. And we go to work and we put all that behind and we do our best that we can. Like I said, knowing that it's there. It's a great point, Bonnie.
Bonnie, you made a point that this goes beyond policing, and you're absolutely right. What's going on right now is really a symptom of centuries of issues that have been building. And there's so much work to do for us to get racism in the history books forever. As a community, we want to be an example for the rest of the country. To get to where we're going, we got to look at where we are today. In your view, where are we right now in the city of Sioux Falls as we think forward? Where are we today?
And I want to contextualize this because I'm incredibly optimistic, right? I'm incredibly optimistic because we have people like Lieutenant Thum, who I've known for a long time, but also somebody I could call, somebody who's trying to learn different languages so that they can communicate with people better, the person that's going to go visit the mosque, the person that's going to go talk to the families after the incident, right? Yeah. We have a lot of those folks in here, and which is really rare is having them at every level. Like we have captains that think like that, we have lieutenants that think like that, sergeants that think like that, people on the street that think like that, and we have a chief that thinks like that. It's rare. I need people to understand how rare that is in some cases, so that they realize how blessed we are in that way. Now, what that means is that we also have to look at our administration. We have to look at the justice system. We have to look at our support systems, all the way to our nonprofits, all of those type of things. It involves the Development Foundation, the Chamber. How are we attracting talent to make sure we can get them in uniform, not just for tech, not just for med, not just for bio, but how are we bringing those people in? We need to have people be thoughtful about the taxpayer dollars. When these guys want to go do a basketball tournament or a picnic or whatever to create relationships so we can get diverse people in uniform, so we can break down those walls and have relationships, we can't have people screaming, my taxpayer dollars are going to hot dogs, right? You have to see the big picture. You have to be able to understand what it is that you're asking people to do and give them those creative solutions. We have to cheer them on. We have to ask that they be bold. We have to create a situation where accountability is not seen as an attack, right? But rather the due diligence of an active citizenry, right? This is what we're supposed to, this is part of our agreement, to say you don't have to do it all by yourself, right? We're gonna put our hands back on the wheel. That goes to the individual citizen. Stop calling them for silly stuff, right? Stop calling them for neighborhood spats where you can just walk over to your neighbor and have a conversation. That's another touch point that they have to be engaged in that creates an opportunity for something to go south. That's another FTE. That's another human being that they have to put in the squad car that makes us further away from being diverse, makes it more difficult to staff up because they could be called because your kid didn't do their homework. So we have to take that part on as well so that the work that they're doing is necessary. So it's either community building, and in those rare occasions where they have to do to thwart crime or to do something post-crime, they can do that, right? So that's all of us, that's every single bit of it. And so when we talk about alternative policing, when we talk about alternatives to incarceration, when we are more compassionate, thinking about treatment and all of those things, that's what it's gonna take for us to get to where we gotta get. So again, when people shift all the energy on the police and they shift all the energy on people like me or whoever else, that's where we're losing it, because nobody can hold up to that. No one can hold up to that, and no one can do all of that. So each individual person that's listening right now has to do a personal inventory. They have to ask themselves, prior to these events, what did you contribute to the betterment of this community in terms of these type of things? What has your commentary been in your social media and your friend groups? What are the things that you challenge? You know, the mayor, when he was getting through the chief cultural position, there was a lot of angst around that. But those are the type of things we should be begging for, right? We need to take care of the people that take care of the people, because they're people.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the type of things that we're talking about. We shouldn't just try to stuff people in the box and throw away the key. We need to say what led to that person be there. How do we deal with that? How do we keep families whole? And how do we make sure that when people get out, we allow them to re-enter into the society as if they paid their debt, which they have. And so those are the type of things that we have to do, and that's a lot of things.
It's a lot of stuff.
But if everybody does their part, we can get there.
On that, like, where are we at right now?
Yeah.
I personally, and I think a lot of people felt a lot of pressure that anything other than a 100% positive outcome on Sunday would be some sort of indictment to our community and an indictment to the work we've done.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm like, this is a lot of pressure that we're all kind of hanging here in the balance. Are we writing a news story, or are we becoming a news story? You know, and when it was all said and done, I shared that thought with a few people, and one of them was Christy Nicolaisen at the Multicultural Center. I'm like, I'm just worried that a negative outcome will be seen negatively. She goes, regardless of what happened, know this. 10 years ago when I started, when a police officer would walk in, the kids were scared, and they didn't know what to do. Now you walk in, and they give you a hug. Right? They clamor around you. They come to you. And Vaney's made a lot of points about generational and how we pass stuff down and in furthering the conversation. And this community-minded conversation we're having has to look at those kids as a huge part of it, and how we're bringing them up and how we're working together. Because regardless of what happened in the conversations and everything that we've said so far, we should not rest on our laurels 1 second, right? We should keep that conversation, that personal inventory about what you're doing as an individual to make this a better community and to work on some of these issues.
That is very encouraging, and I think about how great it is that we're in Sioux Falls. We should feel very fortunate. Change starts from the inside. We're going to work our way out a little bit. It starts in our own hearts, our own neighborhoods, our own city, and it just kind of builds up from there. But oftentimes hatred starts on the outside. It's magnified by social media.
Yeah.
How do we take what we are working on in Sioux Falls, and we have work to do, and take it so we can magnify out and overcome what is coming from the outside on these issues?
Well, for me, it's number one, we have so many wonderfully talented, amazing people here that have so many skills. Take your talents and figure out how to take that talent. Don't bury it, right?
Yeah.
How to multiply that talent. Take that talent, whatever it is. If you make films about our community. Talk about the great things that we are doing. If you are a social media person, operate social media to help us tell the story and communicate and bring people together and do those type of things. For us, we have been dialogue. This is the interesting thing as we've been talking about this. Like, it's different for us because like we've been in the room doing the work for like 20 years. You know what I mean? So it's like how we feel about each other is different than what's going on out there. Get in the room, get on the committee. You know, everybody has those talents that they can start to deploy to help us get to where it is that we have to get, right? And if we can start telling these stories, and then again, like I said, we have to give our leadership encouragement, permission, and then sometimes demand that they be bold. I say this all the time, that the Midwest might be this country's last best chance to get it right. Because we have an opportunity to see everything that has happened. We used to be a butt of a lot of jokes. We were always behind everything. Well, now that works as a benefit. But here's what we got to understand. We're not different than Minneapolis. We're not special. We're early.
Yeah.
Okay? Minneapolis used to be Sioux Falls. And they didn't do the work at that time to heal some of those things, to be able to stave off some of the things that they're going through right now. And you see the ramifications of that. We see the beginnings of that with some of the things that happened the other night, right? And that's a chance for us to click on that light and say, we have runway. We have an opportunity to do these bold things right now. Customize how we operate our government. customize how we operate our police force, customize how we operate our community. It doesn't have to match anything else anywhere. It has to make sense for us, and it has to make sense for people. If people start to think beyond the box, there is no box.
Yeah.
Everything's on the table. As long as we're people-centric, as long as we're thinking about community, we can do whatever. We just need everybody to chip in with their talents, and we can absolutely make it happen.
You talk about the social media component of all this, and I will say that social media has never brought us closer together as a country. We've never been more connected, but in many ways that's drove us further apart. And I think if we look at things, we cannot affect what happens in other parts of the country. We can focus on our community, and if we somehow seemingly forget that we are not a national police force. Sioux Falls Police Department is what it says on my patch, and I serve the city of Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
And that's our objective and our goal. And while we can take these nationwide things into context and look at, okay, what's the Sioux Falls Police Department doing about this? I can tell you the day after the George Floyd video came out, we made a training video, made every officer that wears a uniform watch it, and deconstructed what went wrong and why that's against our tactics and our training. And this is exactly why we teach you not to do this, is because this is the possible result, right? And so, but social media will get in, and I'll be honest with you, I follow Twitter for news, and I look at what's out there, and when a picture of me had an out-and-out lie underneath it about something I did, and then I pulled up the person's profile, and they followed one account and had 0 followers. Right? So if you don't think people are trying to push some things that don't need to be pushed or try to interfere with things, again, we focus on who we are as a community, and then we go out, right? Because maybe we get something really right here, and then somebody else says, hey, what'd you do in Sioux Falls? Give us your playbook, right? Because we are not exclusive to good ideas, and if we have a good idea, let's share it with other people, and then we can work from the inside out, not so much the outside in, on what the change we want to see and how we want things to manifest themselves throughout the country. And I think it starts by here, and then it goes from there.
If there's ever been an issue for Sioux Falls to lead on, this is the issue.
Yeah.
We have the ability to lead the country on this issue, and I'm grateful for the two of you.
And we've shown it time and time again that Sioux Falls has led the way. Through recessions, we've come through because of who we are in our leadership and how we position ourselves. Through other events, we've come through and led the way. And I don't see why we can't lead the way on this one as well. I think, again, by no means are we going to sit and pat ourselves on the back because of what we've done, but we need to look forward to what we're going to do and how we're going to make those changes and further our position.
Progress is a journey, and we're going to talk now about what we're going to do next as a community and what you guys are already working on. What are some things that we can do right now in our homes, in our businesses, police department, city hall, to move forward? I would like to touch on each of those individually because they all serve their own purpose. Bonnie, I'll let you start with our home.
So for me, the first thing is again, get with your family. Have hard conversations with them. Talk to your kids. See how they feel. Give them a voice. Give them an opportunity to express themselves so they're not expressing themselves in negative ways. That's the first thing. How do we do that piece of it? Outside of that, be a neighbor. Know who you live by. Talk to them. Communicate to them. Have courageous conversations, right? And actually engage with them. And I promise you, there's a lot of calls that will go away if people do that piece of it. Grab a young person and mentor them. This very club is working on the Sioux 52 program. We are out there. We are lobbying businesses and individuals to engage. They can engage with us. They can engage with 2-on-1. And they can participate. And they can be in the game as a mentor. My company, our leadership development program, we want to make that an academy. Our vision is to make that so that every person in this community has access to leadership development for our most vulnerable populations, to give them the opportunity to upward mobilize themselves. When you have that real independence and you have that self-esteem, that's when a person can be most effective in the community. The other piece of it is get back in the game politically, right? And what I mean by we do this thing where we always tell each other, the two things you don't ever talk about is politics and religion.
Right.
Well, what are the two things that drive almost everybody's decision on almost everything? Politics and religion. We should talk about it all the time, just like adults, right? So let's talk about it. Let's get our hands back on the wheel. Let's have clear expectations for our leaders. And then the other piece for me is representation. Now, representation does not mean you just grab a person in color off the street and you put them in a position of power. No. It means we make a concerted effort to be thoughtful about how we can create initiatives to make that happen. I want everybody just to think about this for a second. Think about the diversity that we have in this community, in our C-suites, in our businesses. Think about the diversity that we have in our nonprofit leadership. Think about the diversity that we have in our PD, in our fire. Think about the diversity that we have in our first responders. Think about the diversity that we have in our legislature, in our city government, in our state government, in any administration within this state. And it is almost zero, right? So when you have 40, almost 50% of young people in schools that are of diverse nature, that are going to be in this community in full force, when you have 5,000 people coming every year in migration, that many of them are diverse, and they can't look anywhere in their community in terms of authority or leadership and see themselves, what does that say about the community? And for them, what is that projecting to those people in terms about how the community feels about their capabilities, that they feel about their voice, and what they can contribute? So those are the things that we could do. The other piece of it is obviously with PD, we're trying to beef up the community ambassador program. We want voices at the table. We want people being well and engaged. I think those voices need to become more and more youthful. We need to get young people into the conversation. They're not going to inherit this world. This is their world now. We need to engage them now in the conversation because they have stock to it. And I think if we do those things, which are very real things and programs that are already being established, some by this very club, I think what we can do in just a matter of years will blow the rest of the world away. I mean, and like Lieutenant said, we can be the model. We can lead, right? We can lead on this thing. So those are the things that I would point to initially. I know it's a lot of things again, but those are the things that I would point to initially. We even, one thing I will mention too, I'll do a plug for this. We even, so many people reached out to me after this, wanting to know how they help. And we even have a website, howcanihelpsf.com, where people can just go in and put their email. We're going to create a list so that when we have opportunities or information, we can try to kick it out to people so we can do a better job of figuring out how people can help. Hopefully we want to make that more robust to make it easier to match people with opportunities. But howcanihelpsf.com, we want people just to throw in their email and find a way that we can engage those folks that want to help.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Thum, this question to you, I guess. You deal with families and businesses in the city. What can they all do? What can they all do right now?
And I just want to touch on home quick first. And my wife and I had a conversation last night, and we were like, this wouldn't make any sense to our kids. We have a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old. Because when they talk about school, when they talk about their friends at school, there's no identifying things. They go to a school that I did a survey of his class, and it's exactly right on 50% diverse in his class. And it's interesting that kids now, right, have the opportunity to learn these issues or learn these behaviors, or we have the opportunity to show them that that's not the right way to think, or that's even this outside force to start to influence that. And kids would look at us, if you took a second grader right now and said, okay, well, this is what happened, and then explain the dynamics, they would look at us like we had lost our minds, right? Because that's not a Hispanic kid, that's just my friend Horatio. Or that's just my friend Julia. Or that's just my friend. It's just my friend, right? And so it starts with those conversations with your kids. And when outside influences start to nip at your kids, right, because they will through the like other things, what are you doing to say, hey, here's our Sioux Falls, here's our country, and here's the path we need to go down. And so it starts really with what we're doing at home. And then with businesses. Again, this is very easy to sit on the sidelines and look at, okay, how are police and activists and groups going to solve these issues, right? Even, okay, how are, without getting involved. But now everybody has to take assessment of the service. Sergeant Seaborn, who's the CRO sergeant, and has worked on a lot of things, we sat down, it was the next day, had a phone call, and I'm the SWAT commander, he's one of the team leaders, and he's like, what are we doing as a SWAT team to work on this issue right now? What are our next steps? What are we going to do for some of the kids who may have been out there that night, how are we going to cross the line, so to speak, and reach out to them to build that understanding, right? So I can't give you a playbook on how to do it or what to do, but a good self-assessment on what we're going to do on this issue, I think is really the important step forward for everybody. And again, what it may look like for somebody else is different, but at the end of the day, can I look myself in the mirror and say, I'm doing something to make Sioux Falls better, I think is what we need to rally around.
We all are leaders in our own homes.
Yep.
We can all make decisions every single day about how we address this issue to our partners and to our friends and to our children. And when you're in business or you're a leader of a business, every day you have choices to make. And the same with the city and the same with the police department. And that's why I'm so grateful that you guys are having those hard conversations about immediate action. What can you do right now?
And we've even talked about, I think we were naive enough to think at one point that, we'll do a social media post about looking for new officers, right? Yeah, we need new officers. We want a more diverse police force, right? People are asking us to do that, right? So I think naively we thought we could just ask for it.
Right.
Right? We could just say, hey, well, let's do a social media campaign, or let's do this. But I realized something through our efforts is that we need help. Like, we need the different communities to say up and say, how can we partner with you to raise somebody up from this Eritrean community, this Liberian community, the Sudanese, the different representations throughout this community, right? Because we try to make this kind of a black and white issue, right?
Right.
It's not,
there's a lot more going on.
like, if you look at the full list of different people that are different groups and countries that are represented within our town, I think many of us, if you don't even know that, start the conversation there.
Right.
Reach out and get some resources as to just how diverse Sioux Falls is in the path that we're heading as far as diversity goes. And so, again, I think for us, we look at how the community can work with us, not against us. And I don't think they're working against us, but I think we need to make a more concentrated effort to say, hey, yeah, let's work together on getting diversity within the police department. Because I'll be honest, posting social media ads isn't going to help. And guess what? Post Ferguson, it was hard. Post this event, because it's a whole nationwide event. It's not just one thing.
It's a global event.
Global event. It's going to be even harder. Right?
Yeah.
So we got to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work and make that happen.
Speaking of rolling up sleeves, for decades, centuries, people have been trying to solve this underlying problem, this underlying issue. And progress gets made, and then we kind of revert back, and progress gets made. How do we keep this issue front and center? And I'd like to invite the two of you back to the club. Technology will go seamless. But I'd like to invite you guys back to the club again this year, over the next year. Because we need to keep this issue front and center. But if you were to look back a year from now, what things are you going to look to determine whether or not we are in fact making progress? What are those things? Because it's all about action.
In its tangible goals, right? Something you can reach out and touch.
Yeah.
Is probably what a lot of people desire. Because in this day and age, we want quick fixes.
It's not a quick fix.
No, it's not. And I think what we can look at is different initiatives like the mentoring initiatives, right? What's our involvement there, right? What's our involvement with these different programs that are going to stem out of that? Are we struggling for volunteers? Are we struggling for people to step up? Right. And I think that's the first tangible goal, because again, this is not an overnight issue that just gets solved. This is a lot of work to do. And honestly, we're solving it for our kids. We're working on it for our kids. So honestly, they're going to have to pick up the mantle and carry it forward from there. Because again, we look at history in hundreds of years, and then we can go to Europe and we can look even further deep into our history, right? And we can look at other parts of the world. And this is not just a USA problem, right? This is a worldwide issue that we're working with. So for me, it's going to be who's reaching out from the community, who's stepping up to walk alongside all of us. And if we're struggling for volunteers, then I think that'll be disheartening. If we're struggling for mentors, I think that'll be disheartening.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, I like to see, the conversation change a little bit. One of the things that's key to being able to grow and move forward is being able to see progress, right? Because if you can't see progress, you're always going to feel like nothing's happening and you're behind the eight ball, right? So we have to be able to see progress. We have to really see efforts that people are making, appreciate it, and acknowledge it. Same time, we need people to understand the urgency, right? That this is not a now thing. This has been forever, right? We need that. It'd be nice, and I believe the media is changing in a lot of ways, and I think they want to tell stories a little bit differently, and I'm really proud of some of the young journalists in this community that are doing different things, people that I believe are committed to not just talking about the moment, but covering the movement, right? Which is over time. You can't tell these stories just when it's sensational and not tell these stories when we're trying to get people to a gathering or we're trying to get people to a meeting or whatever. That's when we really need you to go hard to make sure people show up to have those conversations. The other thing is again, I want to hear a change in our dialogue. One of the things that has come out a lot for me, people calling me and they want to talk about various things, and they'll say, Vaney, I'm not racist. I'm not. And my thing is I do not want to know what you're not. I want to know what you are. What is your affirmative action that you are putting into the world? What are you doing into the world? Good has to go on offense. We know negativity is in abundance. We know it's coming for us. We know it's coming for your children. We know it's coming for our community. It's coming for our happiness. We know that good has to go on offense. We have to project that out into the world. We can't sit back and hope and expect something to go right because it did 10 years ago. We have to be in the game. So that's one of those things that I would really like to see. Because, you know what, for me, as a black person, you don't have to be racist to be my problem, right? You could be a might as well be. Because if every time something like this happens, we have to lobby to you, we have to beg you, ask you, argue with you to get you in the game to do something that everybody says they're in league with. I mean, selling justice, selling equality, selling fairness, we know that this system was built under racist pretenses. The idea that it doesn't have racist elements in it still now, or that it doesn't work. If this country worked for black people, it would be an accident because it wasn't designed to. We weren't even considered full humans when this was designed. We were 3/5 of men. And so when you know it wasn't in the design, when you know we weren't being thought about in its inception, why would it work for us? Why wouldn't you be racist? Right? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you be, given how we've had this conversation? So in order for that to change, people can't just not be racist, right? They have to be anti-racist. They have to be engaged, and good has to go on offense. And I believe, like I said, right now, especially, and I mean this to the core of my heart, in terms of our leadership, at almost every single corner, I believe we have what we need to, at the very least, put a big dent in that movement. But we need everybody. And we got to go now.
It's called contact theory, right? It's another thing we can do. Exactly what you're talking about. Contact theory, that is, if I have a conversation with somebody I may be uncomfortable with, if I have an interaction with somebody that I'm maybe not familiar with, I create a new anchor point for my feelings and my thoughts, right? Yeah. And it kind of goes both ways, right? We need to go out as law enforcement and have positive contacts. And maybe as citizens or residents of Sioux Falls, you go out and have positive contacts with either law enforcement or a group of people you're not familiar with, right? And we reach out and we have those contacts, and then we create new relationships. And that's another thing we can do. I may not be comfortable with, maybe not have ever been to a Mexican grocery store before, right? Walk in, buy something.
Right.
Right? Yeah. I maybe never have had a sambusa from Mogadishu on East 10th Street, right? Walk in and buy one. I bet they'll greet you with open arms. Yeah. And have, so start reaching out into pockets of the community that you aren't comfortable with, and that includes police. Right? So you may not be comfortable with the police. Come to one of our events because we want to chat. We want to have conversations.
People don't know like how much a head nod does. Yeah. Just police driving by, you're walking by. What's up?
Yep.
You know
right?
What I mean?
Yeah. I was driving the other day, and it was after everything happened. Some guy looks at me and he just goes, and I'm like, "Thank you."
Yeah. Right? That's it.
That's it. And it starts with little pieces there, but I can't. There's a whole Sioux Falls that many people don't know exists.
For sure.
That's right.
The diversity of the different groups, and we can stay in our isolated pockets, or we can step outside our comfort zone and learn new things about our community every day.
What can the business community do?
First of all, you could really take a real inventory, a real hard look at the culture that you have in your walls. Is it inviting to diversity? And I don't mean diversity as a cold word, as a little thing you do right now. I'm talking about as a real principle and value. Knowing that having diverse thought, having diverse perspective makes you more prepared to deal with more things. It is a competitive advantage. It's not just to do something to be politically correct and make people feel good. It is not only the right thing to do, but it's the effective thing to do, because doing good is good business. Do you have that environment? Secondly, are you projecting it? Are you putting it out into the world? And then third, are you making investments into your community? You got to put your money where your mouth is. If you want to have that people, if you want to have that workforce that you can draw from, that can bring you all those perspectives and talents and skills and abilities, invest in your community. Find a program that you believe in, invest in it. Find an organization that you believe in and invest in it. Develop a program or something yourself and invest in it. Get to young people now, help build them up, and they'll come to your companies. They'll buy your products. They'll do all of that. What we see right now from young people especially is that they don't want to do business with people who are not aligned with them socially, who do not care about the values that they have. They don't want to work for people who don't have those type of values and are willing to stand on them. They don't want to be around people who are not willing to live their values and stand on it. And that is a good thing. And so now people can change that. And again, good is good business. And so we can project that out, and we'll be in a better place in our community. We'll be better as a result.
Good is good business. Vaney Hariri and Lieutenant John Thum, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your example, and thank you for your leadership on this important subject. Over the last few months, the Downtown Rotary Club of Sioux Falls has worked diligently to bring educational and relevant programming to our members and this community. We understand the role that we play in this community, and we will continue to bring forward programs that address the moment that we are in, no matter how difficult the subject. Thank you for joining us today, and let's move forward together as a community with the spirit of understanding. Thank you.